Folks, welcome to this week's edition of Tech Sales Advice. I am, of course, your host, Chris White, and these are live conversations, folks. As I like to say, these conversations are unscripted, unrehearsed, and unpredictable. And this is the LinkedIn Live show for technical sales professionals and technical sales leaders. The gentleman who's with me today is no stranger to the show. I think this is his third appearance. He is no stranger to the pre-sales world. His name is Tony Francetic. He is, and I had to write it down and make sure I got this right, the director, a recent promotion to director of pre-sales support with Thomson Reuters. I sometimes even struggle with that name, but I think I got it right. You got it. We are going to be talking about the expanding role of pre-sales. I'm not even sure we can call it pre-sales anymore, but that's precisely what we're going to dig into. But before we get there, Tony, my friend, it is very good to see you. Welcome. How are you doing, sir?
Great. I'm super happy to be here. I always appreciate getting the chance to talk with you and all those folks in the pre-sales industry who like to join on the calls here. So I don't always get a chance to see everybody's. I like to put a chat in there when I get a chance if you're talking to peers in the marketplace. But no, it's a great service you do to the industry and bring a lot of light to all the great things going on in the pre-sales world. So thanks for all you do, sir.
Well, thank you. I appreciate those words, and I'm happy to have you. And I have to mention, so you've got a couple things you've been doing. Is it Motivation Monday and Wisdom Wednesday? Do I have that right? And am I missing?
So I used to do a FaceTime Friday where I did videos, and to be completely honest, I ran out of content that I could just on the spot do because it comes up often. So like the Motivation Mondays and Wednesday Wisdom, it came out of a session I went to a while back about just building your personal brand, and I wanted to commit to something and be like, you know what? Well, this is a good thing to get it out there, and it was a lot of initial pre-sales focus where I tried to tie everything back into pre-sales and. It's evolved a little bit. And I tell everybody as much as I like to get the message out there, because personally, I think mindset is the one thing that we need to lean into more than anything else in the sales division. But it's as much for me as it is for the people that follow me. And I think, when you look at, we're all human. And I think that when I start off on Monday, it's one of the first things I have on my task list is to make sure, and I go out, and everybody always asks, like, oh, do you have these built up? Do you have them leave ahead of time? And truth be told, no. I start out, I look for some, whatever my focus is on that day. If it's like, hey, it's cold outside, there's ice I had to scrape off my car. What does it mean? How do you motivate yourself when it's cold? And I'll find a quote that I'll tie to it and then just kind of bring that into my perspective.
Love it.
And then Wednesday's hump day, right? Like we need that motivation too, but I always try and tie back to like the Stoic wisdom. That's been my kind of thing that's helped me a lot. There's a ton of quotes out there from Stoicism, Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, Seneca. Like there's a ton of just brilliant minds from history. And I'll find something and tie that back to kind of, again, how do you get through the day? How do you continue forward? And the Friday thing dropped off. I did it for like half a year and I'm just like, on the spot, like it's more takes, right? Because then if you flub a line in a video, it's a lot harder, then you got to restart it. So those dropped off and I've stuck with Mondays and Wednesdays to be consistent. So
Cool. Well, it's good. It's good stuff. If you don't follow Tony, I encourage you to do so. He puts, and I love them. I mean, many of them I'm familiar with, but they're just great reminders. And some of them I haven't seen before, but they're just great reminders. And they certainly motivate me and keep me going. So, and by the way, you mentioned mindset. We might circle back on that one. In any event, we're talking about the expanding role of pre-sales. And this really spawned as a result of a new role that you have. So do you mind just talking a little bit about this new role that you have? And I'm particularly interested in the term pre-sales support. So what is this new role that you have, sir?
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. So I had been a manager of our solutions consulting team for a number of years, and we were part of a go-to-market division that kind of was a parallel to the sales org, and it encompassed a whole lot of things. It was sales training and onboarding, campus recruiting, the sales support coordinators, sales development reps, so like the appointment setters, cold calling, and then the solution consultants. So we were all in this wing together, and they did a bit of a reorg, and that kind of go-to-market division was disbanded, I guess you'd say. And this pre-sales support function came under the sales wing. So I'm back under the sales organization. And that includes our solutions consulting team as well as the SDRs. So if you think of that kind of first stage of contact to set an appointment for the sales reps, the SDRs are in that component, and their managers roll up to me. And then in my pre-sales org, I had a manager that was like, I was a senior manager, and then I had a manager, and then we had the team. Well, we've since expanded that structure. So I've got 2 managers, 4 leads, and those are going to support like our strategic function, as well as a specialty area in our advisory services, and then the solution consulting team. So it's a expansion of the structure of the solutions consulting side, like true pre-sales by our definition. And then it added in that SDR function to think of it as the beginning span of the support of the sales organization.
Interesting. It's so interesting to me. And I don't know why it strikes me as surprising, interesting that a sales leader would look to a pre-sales lead, what we traditionally call pre-sales, right? A solution consulting, a sales engineer leader to take on the BDR team. I think it's fantastic. Now, were you a little intimidated by that? Did you find yourself thinking, whoa, time out? Like you want me to run the team that's actually out there cold calling and knocking on doors?
Yeah, and it was intimidating. And when I first saw the option, I hesitated even when I was looking at the application process, because I'm like, man, that's a whole nother component of the sales process that I hadn't really had prior experience with. But the more that I sat with it, and the more that I kind of went through, I'll tie back to mindset for a second, because one of the culture components I tried to build into the solutions consulting organization was, I'd actually put it in my email, but it said, little hashtag, how can I help? And if you think about what pre-sales really is, it's that support structure where, and I look at it in our group anyways, in 3 kind of legs. So you've got, how do I help my peers? Because pre-sales as a division, solution consulting, they're the most cooperative group that I've ever seen work like everybody helps out everybody. It's just the way that they're built. Well, then you want to help out your sales counterparts because they're the primary function we're supporting, right? And then the third is the customers themselves. And the fun part of the job is when those are not always at the same purpose. If the sales rep is driving one direction, the customer is driving another, we kind of get to corral that and find the right path together. So when I looked at this SDR motion and said like, well, okay, how are we going to instill a similar culture? That's transferable, right? So how do I help the peers? So just like any sales organization, there's attrition and there's going to be new reps that come in. So how do the veterans who do well share best practices internally? So that holds true. How do we help the sales rep? Well, they're setting appointments for the sales reps, and they have to be able to communicate what value they've uncovered to be able to set the rep up for success in the call. So that's there. And they've got to build rapport and talk to the customer, uncover pain, and get the appointment set.
Right.
So it's not a massive leap as I looked at it further of like, okay, if we can just focus on the cultural approach to it of how can I help? Well, then I can expand that part. The technical components, KPIs, how we manage effectiveness, like all of those are going to be different metrics that we follow. But at the core of it, if that's the driver that everybody brings to the table every day, I think we're okay.
I so love that. Hashtag, how can I help? I mean, that just speaks volumes to me. And I just think it's so valuable that a solution consulting mindset, there's a term mindset, is now being brought to the very front end of the sales process, right? The very top of the funnel. Because to me, that adds so much credibility to those more than likely younger career people who are calling on and making cold calls. But by the way, I did not invite people to say hello, so I'm going to push our pause button, Tony. We do have a comment from Mark I hope Winnie or Winnie, Mark, thanks for chiming in. And also Clifford Barcliffe. So I think there's actually a question here from Mark, wondering how it works tactically. Can an SE manager review / optimize cold call scripts? Mark, I have to be honest, I was wondering the same question. So I'm glad you asked. And by the way, if there's anybody else out there that has a question for Tony or myself, please feel free to ask. Tony, how would you just respond to that, sir?
Yeah, and it's one of those areas where we're really lucky to have some partner groups. Like our commercial excellence team does a nice job of associating the call lists for propensity models. They do have some marketing overlay, so we do have some support with the call scripts that they go through. But I look at it a little bit differently from the, you're going to have the script, you're going to have the initial approach and how they're going to enter that dialogue. But to me, the parallel and the thing that I want to hearken into the most is the discovery, the questions, because pre-sales historically, right, when we're solution consultants, we're trying to uncover what's important to that customer and connect that value to our solutions. And if this SDR motion can do something similar in asking the right questions and starting to convey that value,
yeah,
I'm hesitant to go too far down because we don't want them in the selling motion yet. We don't want to suggest solutions, but if we can get them to that point of asking the right questions to uncover the challenges they might be facing or the goals they want to achieve, right? It doesn't have to be that it's always a problem. But if those are the core pieces we highlight, then I think there's enough parallel where I'm hoping I can coach to that too.
I love that.
And then, my former background as a journalist, maybe I can have some writing chops to help out if need be.
I have a feeling they're in good hands with you. So that's awesome. And, it's interesting. Clifford made a comment, uncovering opportunities during the renewal process as well. So, one of the things that I was thinking about, and Tony, I've been talking about this for years, honestly, is, and it aligns with this conversation, is this idea that I feel like the traditional pre-sales role is shifting left and shifting right. Right. And, when I say shifting left, I mean getting more and more involved in the pipeline generation activity. And clearly now you're overseeing a team responsible for filling pipeline, and then the solution team, the solution team, which is responsible for helping through the process through the pipeline. But it's also getting more into the handoff to customer success. So talk a little bit about the process, because when I think BDR and SE, I think step one, and then it goes to the AE, step two, and then it comes back to the solution consultant, step three, which almost sounds like your team is disjointed. Is that not the case?
Well, and it is, when you think, I think your definition of like the true look at the word pre-sale, right? Like what happens prior to the sale. And if it is that, appointment setting motion where they're trying to uncover at least an issue, a problem, a goal, and get them to agree to an appointment with the sales rep, right? That's a component of this group now. The middle stage, and again, with attrition, with, changing of structures, you're always going to have reps that are in that kind of earlier phase of their career. Well, we've started to expand a little bit there too, and support from we call them a strategy call, where we'll meet with the sales rep and talk about, all right, let's review the account. Let's see what we could highlight. Where's an opportunity that we can go after? And then if they are lacking confidence in that discovery phase, the solutions consultants can also then start to ride shotgun, if you will, let the sales rep run points, their relationship, it's their sale, but there is a backup to add some of the technical chops to the conversation and ask some follow-up questions to target in or disqualify where needed. Those are things that we're involved in too. So I'll counter that to say, okay, SDRs, appointment setting, pipeline creation, you're right, step one. We're kind of in step two, and from a support standpoint to be able to back up or provide some insights. Step three for the demo and bring, historically what we would do there, 100% agree. And then to Clifford's point on the renewals, so we've got a role in our division, it's called a client executive. And that's essentially like that farmer, right? They're maintaining the relationship, they look at cross-sell, upsell opportunities. I just had a meeting with the managers a couple of weeks ago, and apparently there was some unwritten rule that somebody made up that said that, well, you can't use solution consultants for that. And I'm like,
interesting.
That's new to me. I would absolutely encourage you to include solutions consulting in that process, because in much the same way, right? I think like a client executive like that, or whatever the definition of your roles that are out there, that's kind of the tougher job as a sales rep, because it's not only knowing the solutions to position what works together and add-ons and upsells. But it's also dealing with the customer service problems and support potential issues, and they're going to come to them first. So I think at the end of the day, there's an opportunity to position or reposition value in a retention cycle. Talk about additions of add-ons, or maybe just building the business in a different direction. Other opportunities that solution consultants are a great fit to be able to support that retention process too. And that goes to your point, Chris. That sphere just expands. And where do we go on the front end of it, and how far down the path do we go on the back end of it? I've got one solution consultant, and this goes back to when we were in the pro services realm. This is 7-8 years ago. She was doing business workflow consulting. So she was out on sites at firms doing, reviewing their processes and making recommendations. And I think there's potential opportunity there, but I think the risk is where does that end? Right? That expansion of our influence is great from an influence perspective. We can benefit marketing, we can benefit product, we can help train sales, we can, do all these things. But then are we too thin spread? Are we going off in too many directions where, I've had people ask, well, what's your job description? And it's a great question, because it continues to grow. Yeah. Where can we bring value? And I've been lucky enough, I know the industry has changed a lot in the last several years with COVID and where technology has been impacted. My team's continued to grow. So I've been blessed from that regard. And I think that, we look at that, how can I help mindset of, can we help marketing spin up a webinar? Can we, be a speaker at a conference? Can we help product give some insights to what customers are saying? The answer is yes to all of them, but I can't do that all the time for everybody. Right. And so it's kind of that juggling act of how do you maintain all of these balls in the air at the same time?
Well, and it's prioritizing, right? And to your point, if we do everything for everybody, at some point we don't do anything for anybody, right? So I do think there needs to be some guardrails on how we prioritize and where we focus. Comment from Faraz. I think many of the individuals have been doing the Swiss Army, and that's exactly what you're talking about. Really, is and by the way, it's only getting worse because of the not just the subscription model, but now the consumption model. Right, the pre-sales is really a misnomer, because it's sort of like pre-onboarding. Right. But the selling never stops, right? We never stop demonstrating value to our customers and making sure that they're realizing value. Clifford had a question. Would SDRs also uncover customer satisfaction concerns that are part of the normal job, i.e. should it be part of the script? Interesting question, Clifford. Thank you for the question. So do you understand the question, Tony? I think the question is, okay, fire away.
Yeah, so we actually have it separated into two teams. I've got an existing SDR motion that focuses only on existing customers for that kind of business review appointment setting to benefit the client executives. And then I've got a true white space team that just is going after anything to help the account executives, who are those, frontline hunters as opposed to the farming group. So we do support both, and 100% different script, different lists to go after, different set of customers.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah. And to your point, and I think you used the term farmer. In one case, we're really farming. We're protecting the revenue, as I like to say, right? Yep. And we're protecting and retaining the revenue. In another motion, it's new logos. It's greenfield. It's white space, right? Et cetera. So again, Clifford, good question. Something I want to circle back on just for a moment. And there's a picture that's beginning to form in my mind a little bit more clearly. It's this notion of support. And this is a fine line for me, because I do think that whether we're in pre-sales or BDR, we need to think of ourselves as support personnel / service providers, if I can use that term, to our sales counterparts, right? And it sounds like your primary, quote, internal customer is the account executive team that you support, right? And maybe the client executive team as well, right? But where does this notion of support become too much subservient to the point where maybe we're not viewed as strategic partners. And have you considered that? Have you run into that at all?
It is. And it's funny, as soon as you started going down that path, I'm like, gee, it's like you have a chapter on partnership or something in your book, Chris. But it really, it's as much, I think if I go back when I first took over the pre-sales team, and this was just the solution consultants, there was a very almost adversarial relationship where it was, subservient. It's a great way to put it, just as you mentioned, right? We were just the demo team, right? We didn't do much beyond that. And it's been my mission to kind of expand that and look at it truly as a partnership, to the point now where, we just were at our annual sales meeting end of January, and we've got, awards where we've got Solution Consultant of the Year, and we're up there with the sales team, and we're, getting the same type of recognition that wasn't there prior.
Love
right?
that.
And I think that partnership really truly is where solutions consultings are, because we are training reps from a sales perspective on the products, not the sales. There's a separate division that does the sales skills. I want to differentiate and not step on toes. But the how do we help to inform them on the value propositions and the how-tos within the solution, and so they better understand the programs that they're selling. We dabble in that world. We work with the marketing teams. We work with the product teams. Like, I think we've established that there is a true partnership from a solutions consulting perspective. They're there as a peer. And most of the most successful sales reps view it that way too. It's not go do this for me. It's how can we achieve this together? And that by far is the underpinning to the success of my team. Now, when you take that kind of a step further and say, all right, well, how does a salesperson make their number, right? It's not on the shoulders of a solution consultant. And you can say it's with the solution consultant, but then you have all these other supporting characters that are in that mix. SDRs, BDRs, we've got the sales support coordinators for administrative function. We've got the client executives for the retention piece. There's a team, and there really truly is that approach to it. And I think it was Forrester had some research recently that said it was 57% of salespeople are projected to miss their targets, right? And if you look at that partnership, if you don't prioritize that and leverage those resources to benefit, that's why they miss.
Amen.
So if I look at that as support and is it subservient, I think by the first look definition of it, yeah, like we're supporting sales, like we're a supporting cast. We're not the important person on the stage. But when it's a demo, you better believe that sales rep's going to step aside and let you take front and center, because that's what solution consultants do best.
Right.
So how do you maintain that balance in relationship? And it's give and take. Yeah. We need feedback when we don't do well. We're not perfect. Right. Solution consultants are always going to have room for growth and development, just like sales reps. And if there's an openness where they can have that dialogue and say, hey, it really could have been better if we did this, this, and this, or hey, we probably should have got together beforehand and strategized on how we approach this difficult customer, that's where teams grow. And when I first started, I wanted to get feedback from the sales teams for that very reason. So I had my team that had a feedback forum for sales, and I had a feedback forum for sales to give on solution consultants. And it was funny because we'll call it critical, right? Like, you can improve here, here, and here. This was good. This was, opportunity to improve.
Yeah.
But if it was feedback on the solution consultants from the sales reps, it was a 1 to 7 rating. They're all 7s.
Wow.
Like, team's perfect. But it was a fear of retribution. Like, if I critique you, then you're going to tank my next demo, which is so crazy to me.
Yeah.
But it's overcoming some of those old processes, I suppose, of you did a crappy demo and lost my deal.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're in it together. And that's what we've kind of instilled. Yeah. And I think there's opportunity there with the SDRs too. Yeah. And then account executives, as well as client executives, as well as right. Go down the chain. That is a group of people that are there to support the customer. And if you go back to that as your core, right, the customer experience being paramount, it doesn't matter, right, who all is involved. The customer wins when we win together.
Yeah. Amen. Man, I love that. Folks, I'm speaking to Tony Francetic. He is the director of pre-sales support with Thomson Reuters. If you have any comments or questions for Tony or myself, please feel free to ask, or if you just want to say hello. We love hearing and seeing who's out there. We're talking about the expanding role of pre-sales. Something you just mentioned, Tony, a moment ago is something to the effect of training the reps. And this is not the first time I've heard of solution consulting teams being responsible for doing some level of training, some level of enablement. But then the question I always have is, well, how do we balance what they do with what the sales enablement teams are doing? And is it in concert with sales enablement, et cetera? Do you mind elaborating on how it is that your team is quote training the reps?
Yeah, and I think your point is spot on, because you've got the sales enablement function, which historically is like your sales skills, your sales methodology, and there's tons of them that are out there, depending on what you follow. But to me, there's a disconnect in sales skills from the products that you sell, right? And the way that I look at it, solutions consultants can only benefit by learning sales skills. We probably lean more on the presentation side of the house, right? We're going to convey value. We want to understand and ask the right questions, but overcoming objections, that's a skill that can benefit a solutions consultant team.
Amen.
Right? We don't personally get into the pricing conversation. So, there's things where we have to, again, partner really well with the sales rep. But to me, you've got to bring those things together, because we'll use objection handling as a perfect case. If I teach you the general skills of objection handling, but you never understand the objections you're going to face related to the solution you're trying to sell, it takes a lot to kind of get there. I don't know, I channeled some Schwarzenegger there, sorry. It takes a lot to bring those together and just, make the leap to apply what you know about the solution to that objection handling. So in my opinion, when you've got the solution consulting team who is going to be delivering those value stories to the customers and getting their feedback and understanding what they like and don't like about solutions that they're currently using, well, if you blend that then with the sales skills piece, so the training that they're going to have on skills and methodology, the training that solutions consultants can provide and give some insight in terms of product insights, value messaging, and then marry those together. We recently had this kind of group break off to where there's a sales training and onboarding team kind of in tandem with sales enablement and my team. And it's a partnership that brings them together. You're not wrong. That's the hardest thing, in my opinion, is where, at what point do you say, well, solution consultants, you stop, and then sales enablement, you start? That line blurs when you have to blend those together to be successful.
Yeah. I love that. By the way, Faraz made a comment, I think, to when you were talking about the team. At the end of the day, everyone makes money off the same revenue stream. That's well said. And Clifford, at my last place, the AE acted as a quarterback, brought in the SE support. Yes, cohesive message. At the end of the day, that's honestly, that's one of the hardest things to do. Thanks for the comment, Clifford. One of the hardest things to do is have a united front, as I like to say, and deliver that cohesive message, right? So are there specific things that your teams are doing or your SEs are doing with the AEs in particular to make sure they're delivering that cohesive message?
It depends on the rep. There are some who lean into that and understand that it is, like you mentioned, there's that partnership where they can trust that they're working well together for the right reasons. And then, I'll pick on the veterans, right? The ones that have been here for 25 years and they know what they're doing, and all these changes they don't have to keep up with. Well, sometimes they're hesitant to lean on the pre-sales team because they've done it, they've sold it their way. Yeah. And I think when you look at the buyer groups and what's happening in the market of, it's not a handshake and a cigar anymore. There's right. A lot that goes into that process of research and discovery, and it's far more technical, I think, because there's more risk involved. Like the higher the business grows that's going to be purchasing, the more there is at stake for change management. And if you don't lean into that understanding of how do you best leverage partnerships, and you can't do it on your own, which runs counter, right? That's common in the market. Sales are lone wolves in a lot of cases. Like, it's my quota, like I got to make my number, but to do that, you can't be by yourself. Is there things that we do? So we manage kind of like a support inbox, if you will. It used to be that there was a sales specific customer support email that they would throw in, like, customer calls in, talks to the sales rep, and they communicate back to the support team. Well, support team and to their credit, right? Super knowledgeable, all in technical support. That's where I started. I know how challenging the role is. They're almost, focused on like a very direct yes, no answer. Well, in sales, we don't like to say no, right? We've got to find a way to convey that message a little differently. So we actually were a stopgap to those direct support calls and kind of bring a sales message to it. So if they're asking, can the system do X, Y, and Z? Sure, it does it this way.
Right.
Versus no, it doesn't do it exactly how they're saying that they want it.
Right.
And I think there's that bridge where it started to chip away at some of those, differences. Like, look, we're all trying to help make the deal move forward.
Yeah.
How we switched from our bonus model that was tied to sales success. I think that helped to bring teams together. Compensation, if we're all fighting for the same goal, there's a belief, at least from the sales side, that we're working towards the same thing. I think that helped. But from a day-to-day perspective, it's just making sure that you connect with them and try and say, what are we looking to achieve, right? If you didn't do enough discovery and the customer's just challenged, like, just be upfront and honest about it. We'll kick off the demo. We'll start doing a little bit of discovery together and we'll see where we go. Right. And I think that goes back to the Swiss Army knife comment, right? Like, we just need to adapt.
Yeah.
And when you do that with a rep and you're successful, that just builds on itself.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, what I hear you saying is, to a certain degree, we need to be realistic. We need to be realistic with ourselves. We need to be honest with ourselves. We need to go into these situations with eyes wide open, right? And the other thought that came to me as you were talking is sometimes we need to slow down to speed up, right? Yeah. I mean, to me, some of the biggest challenges in terms of presenting a united front, in terms of presenting a cohesive message, is that we're all just trying to move too quickly, and we're moving too fast, and we're making assumptions, right? Yeah. And to your point, look, we're not always going to have all the right information at the right time going into these meetings. That's okay. Let's just be open and honest about it, have a conversation about the best approach, and then move forward accordingly, right? So go ahead. What were you going to say?
I think along those lines, and this goes back to Clifford's comment too about work at the appropriate level. Well, all of those divisions have separate goals. And I think this is one of the issues that collectively sales organizations need to look at. If marketing has marketing goals and sales has sales goals and professional services has their goal, right? And everybody's got different things that they're fighting for. It almost turns into, or has the potential rather, to turn into, well, I've got to prove my worth. So I'm going to make sure that my piece is really important and good, and maybe sacrifice some of that cohesive partnership with the other stages of the sale, because whether it's implementation, onboarding, it's still the sale. Right. The contract may have been signed, but that doesn't mean that sale's over, because they have to implement, they have to use effectively, and then they have to renew. To me, that's a cycle, right? You get through onboarding and you get to that first renewal and they renew. Now you got a customer. That first year is critical. And if every group is out for themselves instead of for the betterment of the customer, that's where you have risk, for sure.
You just said something so profound. It's not until that first renewal that you have a customer. And it's so true. It's so true. And it's so well said. It's one thing to convince someone to invest and take a chance on you and your solution.
Yeah.
Right. But, and by the way, that's tough enough as it is. I'm not suggesting that that's easy by any stretch of the imagination. But true success, a true customer, to your point, is they've completed their first year or their first, whatever the first cycle is, and they see that they're using it, they're seeing value, and they renew. That is so good. I love that. Tony, let's push pause just for a moment, folks. If you've just recently joined, I'm speaking with Tony Francetic. He is a director of pre-sales support with Thomson Reuters. He just recently moved into this role where he now is responsible for the solution consultants and the BDR. So really expanding the definition, certainly in his world, of pre-sales and sales support and pre-sales support. And we've had a number of comments and questions, and by all means, if anybody out there has any more comments or questions, please fire away. Clifford, appreciate your comments in this multimodal way of supporting the customer. How are comp quota tracked? How does leadership know that this model is working if everyone is on the same comp plan? Again, Clifford, good question. Tony, I don't know how much you can divulge around comp plans, but do you want to just share any thoughts that come to mind?
Well, and just to clarify too, like we're tied to the overall sales goal, right? So it's not an individual contributor model like the sales floor typically is. So it isn't the same comp plan per se, but I know, many customer success organizations go on like an annual bonus plan that has a component of sales success that's built into it. We move from that model to more of a commission based, but it's tied to the floor's success towards goal, which is a little bit different than like I said, the individual contributor or the general like annual review bonus or whichever you call it. And the challenge I've always faced with goals around pre-sales specifically is it's not our deal.
Right.
We're a part of that, but we don't own the relationship with the customer. We're a factor of it, right? We influence it certainly, but the sales rep is the one who owns that. And I always use the example, right? You can have the best demo in the world to a misqualified customer and you're not going to move the deal forward, right? So it really is contingent on. So I've always struggled with what are the right goals and metrics to follow the team. And we did several things differently this last year. And this goes credit to Jim Freeman, manager on my squad. We've looked at what do we want them to constantly grow and improve on. And one of those things is project management. Right. Solution consultants take on lots of different things. We're working with marketing, we're working with product, we're working with sales. There's all these things that are there. So we wanted to have goals around, how you develop that project management skill. So we wanted them to at least man a project and have other people with you. And then we had a secondary goal that was you had to be involved in more than one project. We actually had, I think our goal went up to like 15 or more. Wow. We wanted to be involved with things. Well, those are pre-sales or preseason trainings. It was, meeting with sales teams to do best practices, like all sorts of things counted. We just wanted them involved more. But then when it came down to like the specifics on the solution consulting side, like how many demos did you do? What was your overall revenue influence? What was your closing percentage? We took those three things and brought them together into a singular goal and did a rank order and we weighted them. So we wanted close percentage weighted more than anything else. You can't control how many demos you get sometimes.
Right.
You can't always control the size of the deals that are going to come in, but you can do the best you can in every demo and hopefully influence your close percentage.
Love that.
Best rating. Then it was revenue influence and it was number of demos. And we did a stack ranking of the team based on the part that they supported. So it was as close to fairness as we could get when we don't own the deals. But, I will say, and I was really impressed with our team. And this was across our segment of like mid-market and large for our entire division. The team had an average closing percentage of 59%. So good. Some higher, some obviously on the lower end, but throughout the entire year, if there was a demo that was put in front of my team, about 60% of the time it closed. So
it's pretty good.
It's pretty solid.
Yeah. I'm saying that's very good. And Clifford followed that with KPIs versus quota retirement and clearly or retainment and clearly Tony just elaborated on that. And you got a shout out from Sean Campbell. Sean, thanks for tuning in. Tony, 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 believe it or not, we've already been at this 40 minutes. You've already been so gracious with your time. I do have a couple more questions that I want to dig into. Yeah. There's two in specific, but the first of the two is you mentioned some of the more seasoned, some of the more senior account executives that you work with, and they're to me there's both good and bad there, right? The good is, these folks they're pretty good at what they do. They know how to build rapport. They know how to deliver the message. They know how to communicate. The downside is they tend to get a little bit set in their ways, as you said, right? And they're used to taking their approach. Let's talk about the opposite, though, which is some of the less experienced account executives. Do you have some that, and particularly if you've got some more seasoned sales engineers or solution consultants who maybe are working with some of the less experienced account executives, that poses an interesting challenge. And in that regard, like when I think about support, the reality is in some cases, the best way to support them is to actually take more of a leadership role. So how do some of your more seasoned folks handle those situations?
So again, and I give all the credit to my team, because the group of people that are there, veterans on up to the newest additions to the team, when we've got those newer reps, and it's two different examples I'll give. You've got a new rep who's curious, and they have that learning mindset, that growth mindset. They're not stuck in their ways, and they just want to find the best way to get to their customer. So they can learn really early on how to best uncover those right questions to ask when they partner with a solution consultant. And again, my team is fantastic. They love to lean into those newer reps and kind of guide. Take a lead is one, as you put it. I would say, they're guiding them on that path, right? They're giving
Love
them
that term. Yep, they're providing some guidance. Yep,
exactly. Yeah, and then that type of connection. I mean, we've seen newer reps make club because they leaned into that partnership with the solution consultants to be able to then just take off. Right. And they know that they're still learning, and they approach every demo, every interaction with a solution consultant as an opportunity to learn something.
Wow.
I think if they lean into that, you can develop really successful sales reps. And again, this is absent the sales skills piece. They've got sales managers to step in and support that. You've got sales enablement to support that. But the underlying piece of discovery and understanding what's important and connecting that to value and leveraging your partnership, you do those things, and man, there's a really nice roadmap to get a rep to success. And then you've got the people who want to latch on to something else. And I don't know where that comes from, whether they hear advice from, they're bringing it from another job, they latch on to somebody else who doesn't follow the same approach that the solution consultants do. And they're almost, we'll say like the whole, throwing wet spaghetti and see what sticks. Like that's the approach. The thing that's nice about where my team operates now is that's an outlier, and we can work, and we've got such a great working relationship with the sales leadership. We can go and say, you know what, there's an opportunity to work with this rep to help improve, so that we're not, having more and more deals lost that could have been otherwise benefited. And we adopted different processes for this too. Like we put out a feedback form to all win and losses, for everything that came through our Salesforce. Sent out a survey, and we get like 20% retention or response rate on it. That's not, but you get a snapshot of, I stayed because this rep is fantastic, or I did not buy because of this rep. And there's those things that kind of help to justify the insights that a solution consultant can bring to a sales manager. And I think that as long as that trust is there, again, we're all trying to achieve the same thing. We want everybody to be successful. Then you can have that open and honest, like, this rep needs help. And what help is that? Do we have a sales coach that can come in? Can the manager lean into that? Like, what else is there to support them? That's gone a long ways. And more often than not, it's the former, right? Like, we have more reps leaning in early and trying to understand, because those successful reps that are typically topping the scales of the leaderboard every year, they call shout outs. I was so happy at this year's sales kickoff, because almost every session I went to, successful reps talked about solution consultants being support, being part of their success. And if they weren't there, they wouldn't be as successful as they were. And I think that now that's the culture. And since that's there, you can build on it. If you're starting from scratch and you have to establish that, well, this goes back to if I start over 7-8 years ago with this stuff, how do you make a difference? How do you plug yourself into help? How do you just make yourself available and then let that kind of expand? It takes some time, but once you're there, boy, it's fun.
I love that. I love that. Folks, I'm speaking with Tony Francetic. He's the director of pre-sales support for Thomson Reuters. I keep thinking sales support, because that's sort of the role you're in, but it's the pre-sale sort of part. Even though you're also involved in supporting your client executives as well. We will be wrapping things up here in just a few minutes. If any of you have any questions or comments for either one of us, please feel free to share. You're getting a shout out from Lindsay. Lindsay, nice to see you. Thank you. Tony's one of my faves as well. So I told you I had one more question, and you queued me up pretty well, because you used the word trust. And we've been talking a lot about your team's collective role in supporting sales and the things that you do to make them successful. What do you expect from the account executives? And what do you tell your teams to expect from the account executives?
Well, I'll lean on one of my teams said this a long time ago, and it's something that kind of turned into its own, I guess, a mantra, right? We can't care more about the deal than they do. And I think that because it's their cycle, it's their relationship, it's all those things, right? If we're doing all of these things instead of the sales rep, now we're getting into that, like, well, who's doing the work here? Who's getting credit for this deal? Who's getting the big commission check on it, right? Like those things start to creep up. So there is an expectation of that same growth and development. And, there's high expectations of sales in general, right? It's a high stress environment. It's a high risk environment. Those things are all out there. I've coached my team quite a bit on how can we be empathetic to the challenges that sales faces, because if we don't carry a quota and our jobs aren't on the line every month the way that a sales rep's is, if they don't perform, that's a different level of stress that we don't get to experience. Now, of course, we want to have success for the sales reps. We want them to be successful too, and all those things are there. But if it's an expectation of the account exec, well, recognition that they have a stressful job, also that kind of same expectation of recognition that it's not easy to do what we do either. I have lots of times where they're like, well, they said they wanted to see a demo, so I just said, okay, what are they trying to achieve? I don't know. They just said they wanted to see a demo, right? Everybody's gone through that scenario at least once. And I started to pose back to those reps. I'm like, so if you get put into a situation and you're going to get peppered with questions and you don't know what to prepare for, are you super comfortable in that too? And they're like, no. Okay, cool. Now, common ground, right? Nobody wants to be just thrown out and hung out to dry and figure out, all right, well, they're going to go scattershot and hopefully you can handle your own. And then, the sales rep checks out, goes on mute and lets us kind of go at it. But that's kind of that expectation. Like, you've got to be that partner the same way that we want to partner with them. Like, everybody's success is paramount. We want everybody in this group to be together and succeed, customer included. And, when one of those starts to prioritize over the other, like, oh, the demo person, like, well, my demo has to be perfect and the sales rep's terrible, right? Now you're risking that relationship. Or, oh, I want to push the sale forward, even though it's not the right thing for the customer. Now I'm risking that customer relationship. There has to be that group approach to it of, like, what are we all trying to achieve? We want the sales team to be successful. The sales rep wants to meet their number and the customer wants to be successful. How can we make that happen? Sometimes we can't, right? I mentioned earlier, like, sometimes we're disqualifiers, and that's not great. It's not fun, but it's right for the customer. And I have always had faith that if you make the right decision and tell the customer this isn't right for you today, tomorrow they'll come back asking what.
Amen. Yeah. Amen. Well, and not only is it, if it's not right for the customer, it's also not going to be ultimately not right for us. Right. I mean, when I have this conversation in the workshops I run, I ask all the time, have you ever had any customers you wish you didn't have? Right. Because we sold the wrong solution to the wrong organization, and now they're complaining we can't make them happy, and we shouldn't have gone down this path to begin with. Right. So I think the more we have to take that attitude, the better. Have you, it sounds like you've had actual conversations with some of the account executives and sales reps over the years. How intentional have you been in setting expectations with the other sales leaders around expectations?
Fairly direct. I mean, when you've got most sales organizations are going to have attrition. You're going to have top performers. It doesn't matter what you do, they're going to be successful. You're going to have the middle stage, which is the bulk of the sales org, and you're going to have your bottom. And I think that for a long time, we looked at, like, how do we support those bottom folks and how do we bring them up? And more recently, in the last few years, I've been trying to shift that slightly to say, well, we need to put our effort to the middle. That's where we have the biggest opportunity for impact and growth, to get those folks to be high achievers. It's a lot harder to go from bad to good than it is from good to great, right? That's the Good Great's a book that's out there. Like, that's not uncommon knowledge in the business world. But if it's the sales leadership team, and again, when they've got new people, or if they got open coverage, right? They got somebody that's out on leave, or they have something that happened where somebody left the role. How do we step in and provide that guidance or support and say, all right, well, new product update coming. This is what it's going to mean. Make sure you target these things and have a quick session at a team meeting. Offer up that we can join those meetings and be a part of that sales process, and a resource that not only the sales reps, but the managers can rely on too. And that fosters that true partnership we started this conversation off with. If that's present, then it doesn't matter what happens. You can reorg the business. You can, have different segments, switched around. You can have reps that leave and new reps that come in. As long as you go back to the core principles, you're going to be okay. But no, always very, very intentional to say, like, we're here, but those same high expectations exist for the managers. Like, you can't just push it off to us all the time. You've got to carry some weight too.
I love that. And I had a feeling the answer was pretty intentional. And I loved your response. Fairly direct. I have a feeling that there have been more than one occasion when you've been more than just fairly direct, which by the way, that's when real change happens. That's when real communication happens. So comment from Lindsay: the tension between sales and pre-sales often stems from competing leadership objectives, but the reps feel the biggest pain. Very well said. Very well said. Partnership is key to limit this for sure. Very, very well said, Lindsay. Thanks for chiming in. Tony, we're gonna the landing gear is out. The runway is in sight. We're gonna land this plane, sir. I thought of just one final question before I invite you to just share just a few final thoughts, if you have any.
Yeah.
You've used the term, and it's a term that I love, by the way. You've used the term lean in a couple times. Like, when reps really lean in, we've leaned in. What does that mean to Tony Francetic, to lean in?
Well, and this goes back to kind of that growth versus fixed mindset. And I think, we mentioned early on, mindset was going to be a key contributing factor in this. And most of the success that any sales organization can find is if reps are going to believe in something, right? And for the solution consultants, and the way that I kind of go back to that cultural approach of helping, how can I help the reps? How can I help the customers? And I want to help them, whatever it is, achieve goals, build the business, spend more time with family, right? Whatever that is. But if they're going to believe in what they're selling, they're going to believe in the process, they're going to believe in their products, their peers, the people who are going to implement them, the company that they're part of, right? That belief is where I kind of feel like that lean in comment comes from. If they're going to lean into a process, they're going to believe and understand that that's the way they're going to be successful. If they're going to lean into a partnership, same thing, right? They've got to believe that it's in their best interest to partner and everybody comes out ahead. So leaning in really is belief at its core. I don't know of a different way I could put that, but that's, I kind of.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that.
That'll work.
Yeah, that's good.
Else on that one.
I mean, look, man, the first thing that comes to mind for me is Ted Lasso, right? Believe, right? Up on the wall.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So the other thought that came to me, and this might even be worth a blog post, is a certain open-mindedness. To me, if you're going to lean in, I think a big part of that is not thinking, or to use your term, believing that you have all the answers. And being open to learn. You mentioned the growth mindset, and being willing to learn and open to what other people have to say, and just an open-mindedness is something that comes to mind for me.
Vulnerability, right? Like if you're not going to be honest with yourself that you can't or don't understand, or you haven't had the exposure to yet, or you don't have the experience with yet, whatever it may be. If you can't be vulnerable enough with yourself and with the partners who are there to support you, then it's a blocker. And you're not going to find that success and that path forward. So that's a great way to think about it. That openness has to be there if you're gonna have trust in the partnership. The vulnerability is like, I'm not great at this. Can you help? Sales reps never like to say, I don't know, right? They want to have the answer. They want to be that person for their customers. And 100%, if we're in front of a customer, solutions aren't going to throw you under the bus like, oh yeah, sales rep doesn't know what they're talking about. Let me take over. Right? That's never going to be the case. But outside of the customer relationship, how can there be that vulnerability between sales and solution consultants in both directions? Solution consultants don't know all the ins and outs of the sales process. They're not building rapport in much the same way that a sales rep has to. They're not conveying the back and forth of negotiation. They're not pricing. They're not doing contracting. There's all these things that they're not a part of. Well, just open that you don't understand that piece of it. And if they don't understand the solution consultant piece of it, well, that's why you're there together. It's the partnership. That's the definition, why you need each other to move forward. So that vulnerability is important in that whole conversation too.
Love that. Such a good way to close out the conversation. Tony, sir, thank you so much for being here. Any closing words as we wrap this up and say goodbye?
Well, I just did a quick reference earlier, and I was running some stats on things. Lindsay popped in here. She's a good friend, good former associate at Thomas Reuters. She's over at Consensus, and I always try and plug the LinkedIn community that it's out there in the pre-sales market. I wouldn't be where I am without leaders like yourself and plenty of others making themselves available to talk through what's out there and, get engaged. There's so many more groups than there were when I started. Consensus has been a great partner of mine, but Vivint's out there and they've got an entire marketplace of people that's there. They've got an annual conference that they do much the same way that Consensus does in their Demo Fest. Unexpected, I believe, is the Vivint one. You've got Gong, you've got Forrester, you've got Salesforce, all these research arms that are focused on pre-sales support and success. Look at what's out there and try and lean into it. So if you're struggling to try and find, and I know one of the points earlier that Clifford was making around KPIs and quota and how do you maintain balance and how do you determine KPIs? There are tons of great voices out there. Adam Freeman comes to mind as one of the big ones who's been a proponent of specified KPIs for pre-sales. But that, the LinkedIn marketplace of just who's out there in this group that are all willing to share. And I think it's, when I say that, the whole how can I help mentality, it was really born out of just the experiences of working with great people like you, Chris. Like there are so many people who are just willing to say, yep, throw time on my calendar, let's talk. And I still find that today. Yeah. And I've tried to pay it forward and do the same with up and coming, folks who've reached out to me and say, hey, can I talk through what's the next step in my career? If I can find time, absolutely, I want to. I might not have all the answers, but I think it's that part of the community. If you can be a part of that, pay it forward where you can and lean into those folks, where they're out there to support you. This is an area of sales that's going to continue to grow.
So by the way, Sean Campbell said precisely what you just said, lean into the community. And I do have to do a shout out to Sherry Mazza. Sherry, thank you for tuning in. Nice to see your name. Tony, my friend, you are always such a pleasure to speak with. You always brighten up my day. Your energy, your enthusiasm, it's infectious. I'm certain I will be inviting you back to have a conversation again if you are so inclined to do so. In the meantime, thank you so much for today. I hope you have a great rest of your year. Folks, for those of you who tuned in, thank you so much for being here. If you caught the recording, thank you as well. I encourage you to go to techsalesadvisors.com to learn more about the sales training that we do. Also, you can follow hashtag #TechSalesAdvice to follow this show. And of course, Tony, I'm assuming you would love to have people connect with you on LinkedIn if they're not already connected.
Absolutely. Find me there. You bet.
Awesome. Tony, my friend, thank you so much. Hang around backstage just for a minute. Everyone else, have a good week, and we'll see you next week on Tech Sales Advice.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Chris.
Bye.